And now it's my second task for today to be the moderator of this panel. First of all, allow me to introduce Andrea, who teaches at the Department of Art History, the Faculty of Arts at Comenius University in Bratislava, Slovakia. Between 2011 and 2017, she was the researcher at the Institute for Cultural and Visual Studies of the Academy of Fine Arts and Design in Bratislava. Her research focuses on alternative and unofficial art and its societal contextualization between the 60s and the 80s in Eastern Europe, especially in the former Czechoslovakia. She was a member of the Resonances project that was supported by the Visegrad Fund, and she was recently invited researcher at the Institute of Art History in Paris in 2023. Her doctoral thesis, entitled Action Art in Slovakia in the 60s, Actions by Alex Milnacek, was published in German in 2009 and in Slovak in 2011. She also published the monography The Art of Contestation, Performative Practices in Slovakia in the 60s and 70s, and she contributed to a number of books. I won't quote them all, but they were published at Bielefeld and or at Routledge or Transcript and other notable publishing houses, among others. And she's also a member of ICA Slovakia, and fortunately she's here with us via this remote technology. Thank you, Andrea, for being with us today and sharing your presentation.
Thank you very much, and hello to everybody. I wish to be here, to be there in person, and I thank very much also for the invitation and also for organizing this to Christian, Pavlina, and Tomek and Zsuzsa. I have very good memories of the conference in Iași 4 years ago about exhibitions during the Cold War. And actually, our Resonances project emerged in this Iași conference by meeting of some colleagues of us, and the most of you know what resulted of this Resonances project, which is running now. So the title of my presentation is Art History and its Narratives in Former Czechoslovakia Before and After 1989. Actually, my thoughts about this topic go back to the conference which took place in Basel last year, which was dedicated in Museum Tangeli to the topic of performance art narratives, or how the narrative of performance art emerged. It made me to think about how it was built, how it was established, and of course, automatically, to think about the narrative of official art of the socialist realism. And the next step was to think about what happened with these narratives before and after 1989. So I tried somehow to think about this potential research, which has to be done yet, I think. And today I would like to share with you my working version of this thinking about this topic. So my paper aims to explore chosen aspects of the different types of asymmetrical relations and asynchronous processes within contemporary art history, writing art history, and about art history after year 89 was described by Czech art critic Jiří Ševčík as, I quote, live work with sources that are still on the move, end on the quote. Before 89, in former Czechoslovakia, we can consider, I think, 3 different paths and methods of building narratives of art history. And I would like to have the first slide, please.
Yeah, it's okay. It's here.
Firstly, there was generated the narrative of writing history of art corresponding with the theories of Marxism, Leninism, of socialist realism of Soviet type. This narrative was in concert with the political development in the country, in which after 1949, the doctrine of socialist realism was implemented in the cultural sphere. It was a narrative that created and built official structures, and that was carried by them as well. In this way, it became dominant, hegemonic, and monopolistic. Despite of the fact that we cannot consider this narrative as a homogenic and consistent one, the The common basis and point of departure was its accordance with the use of the doctrine of socialist realism of Soviet type, and it became an important instrument of propaganda of the prevailing ideology. This strategy was enforced and implemented programmatically, strictly and consequently on all levels of cultural apparatus. The after effect was that all kinds of artistic expressions that were different to the doctrine of socialist realism was either forced out on the margins or in some cases completely excluded. Secondly, there emerged narrative of non-conformist art that displayed from the end of the 1950s due to the historical events. The death of Stalin and the following process of de-Stalinization generated after 1959 and especially in the second half of the 60s, an epoch of liberalization that featured relatively liberal reflection of art achievements also in the cultural periodicals, for example. After the occupation by the armies of the Warsaw Pact in 1968, the process of consolidation and so-called normalization began. This process went especially from the year 1972 hand in hand with strict reforms, censorship, and violent return to the doctrine of socialist realism as it was applied in the 1950s. The narrative of nonconformist art developed and was formed after the year 1972, mostly in frame of parallel structure. This narrative was transferred and shaped through oral history within intensive discussions and captured in written forms in texts, for example, of samistats that were disseminated and were shared by the circle of people with similar attitudes to what was happening around them. It is important to underline that the narrative of nonconformist art did not emerge exclusively as a product of resistance against socialist realism. It was rooted earlier in the past because it was the frank continuation of the free development of art in the country before Czechoslovakia came under the influence of Soviet Union in 1948. And thirdly, there was the narrative that we could title as working version, title a narrative of old masters or narrative of internal art historical questions. Art history of the past centuries, like of the Romanic or Gothic style, was not as much under influence of the ruling and obligatory ideology, as it reflected periods of time that were not so strongly connected to the fabrication of the contemporary socialist state. As well, the question of evolution of art history in sense of style and influence were part of this narrative that could develop relatively independently. I would like to have the slides, the second slide yet. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm there. Don't worry. I'll go through those slides.
No, but I would like to have the second, the one before.
Yeah. It is already.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. No, I would like to have the one before.
Okay.
Yes.
Narrative. Oh,
okay, thank you very much. So the first two narratives I analyze in this paper are not separated. We can identify connecting points. Despite the fact that the division in mentioned three narratives is a simplification, of course, is a schema, nevertheless, the idea of official and non-conformist narrative can help us to shed light into processes that took place after the fall of the Iron Curtain. And in this sense, this kind of division might be also meaningful. If we have named these narratives essential ones, we considered not their volume, but more their social impact, relevance, and importance. The narrative of non-conformist art had, in comparison to the narrative of official art, a small extent and had impact in very limited radius, but it was large by its significance. In 1989, these narratives had not terminated, of course, and we cannot say that completely new ones would emerge. we can argue that existing narratives were transformed in new forms in the context of recent won freedom after the collapse of the communist regime. Through this, their coordinates changed, and they underwent a cardinal reformation. This reconfiguration happened subsequently, and the revision in art history was set in motion starting from the middle of the 1990s, at least in former Czechoslovakia or Slovakia, which became an independent state in 1993. And now I would like to have the next slide, please. So the first mentioned narrative of official art based on the theories of Marxism-Leninism, of socialist realism, was not terminated through the Velvet Revolution. It ended in the sense that it lost its hegemonic position and it was revised. Its restrictive, repressing, and excluding practices and mechanisms had been unmasked. It was publicly debanked and condemned. Within last decade, experts turned their attention to exploration of this narrative, but it happened within a new paradigm. And we can see also the contributions in our conference today and yesterday go as well in this line. The second mentioned narrative of nonconformist art continued after the Velvet Revolution, while it was reformed from a semi-official or unofficial to official one. It became significant and important, and simultaneously it affected the growth of its research and of presenting its agents in the public. A crucial accompanying aspect was its recognition that went hand in hand with its institutionalization. One point of the program and challenge of institutions became the prevention and rehabilitation of nonconformist art. They were assigned to generate a substitution and systematic compensation of all features that nonconformist art was deprived of in the wide public. For example, the possibility to be exhibited or otherwise presented, to participate on the prevailing academic discourse, and so on. A new construction was created through this revision and rehabilitation that was synchronous reconstruction of the past in the sense of writing art history of that segment of art which was neglected. So in what follows, then I would like to have the next slide, please. I will just look at some crucial exhibitions very quickly because we don't have time to go into detail. Of Slovak National Gallery, which played a crucial role in this process. We have 60s in Slovak visual art. It was the first grand-scale exhibition in 1996. Then art in Slovakia in the 20th century, art of action in Slovakia, 65-89, Slovak visual art, 70 till 85. And we have many other smaller exhibitions in smaller galleries all around in Slovakia. So this is just an example of Slovak National Gallery activities. And as well, we have from the beginning of the millennium, monographic grand-scale exhibitions of Julius Koller, Rudolf Sikora, Jana Želivská, Lubomír Ďurček, Alex Mlynarčík, Stano Filko, and Milan Adamčiak. So actually very well known and very important artists. And I would like to have the next slide, please. So in Slovakia, within the last decade, there were several initiatives for research of the official art. I just took three, I think, crucial exhibitions and publications. The first one is the exhibition that took place 2012, and the second and the third one are publications which were published in recent years, which actually had the topic of socialist realism. Besides that, I would like to drive attention to other important aspects. Simultaneously to all processes described above, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, there is a need for balancing the narrative of nonconformist art with what we could call Western art history. The canon of Western art history was integrated within this narrative of nonconformist art long before '89, in samizdats published by Peter Rezek or by Jazz Section in Prague or by Tomáš Strauss, whereby Western art history was integrated in narrative of official art only or mostly as an example of bad practice in negative connotation. In contrary, it had formative character within narrative of non-official art or nonconformist art and was a highly relevant factor as the exchange across the Iron Curtain had pivotal relevance for it. The transformation of the narrative of nonconformist art after '89 was an update within new context. The narrative of nonconformist art emerged and was established in time of monopoly of the Communist Party within the second public sphere, but had simultaneously no legitimacy in the first official public sphere. It has got its legitimacy after 1989 in transformation process in which the previous order, power structures, and separation between first and second public sphere diverged. After the change of the regime in 1989, the essential question of identity of space and time opened up in its whole complexity. So I decided to take just some text. We could go also much more deeper in this, just to present ideas of Jiří and Jana Ševčík, who argued that the question of identity is nowhere else lived so intensive as in the countries which found themselves in a situation where different traditions overlap, not only the long-lasting Central European tradition, but as well the shorter tradition of belonging to the Eastern Bloc. In their opinion, Czechoslovakia in 1989, I quote, became a partner of completely new partners who didn't undergo the transformation, but who have to participate on it. End of the quote. And I would like to have the next slide, please. It is important at this place to remind of Ševčík's text in that he struck the balance, it was in 2006, by taking distance of confrontation and bipolar standpoint. Further on, he stated that in the last 15 years, from the point of 2006, the last 15 years, there were many texts written about so-called Eastern European art and identified the following problems in 2006. First, compensating request, recognition of culture of these countries. The second, emancipatory request, liberation from the evaluation of the Western point of view. Third, request of new cartography, destruction of the Western cartography. And the fourth dilemma of the new model of art should be constructed by accepting of different values or to insist on own models of creation. He regarded the contemporary situation of ex-socialist Central Eastern Europe as post-colonial epoch in means of that the model of center and periphery was prevailing. I would like to have the next, please. This is already the last one. The Western art, argued Jana and Jiří Ševčík, and I quote, seems to be quite gleichgeschaltet. I have translated it as synchronized, but gleichgeschaltet in German has a little bit more negative connotation. So the Western art seems to be quite synchronized, and it is like this, even if we consider it as a boring process that indicates the inability to make a declaration about itself, the fact of the being empty and manipulated. End of the quote. So they are quite critical in 1991. They reflect of the fact that postmodern culture already overthrew the culture of the former Eastern Bloc with its hyper-productive commercialized phase, and pointed out their objection that, I quote, "The question of identity will be at the end answered as in the West, no identity," end of the quote. As far as the East had lost its counterpart, the communist regime, they presumed that it could turn its subversive activities towards the West, because there is the danger that the East will accept the West and will lose itself. So let me wrap up and conclude just shortly. We can argue that the existing narratives were transformed into new forms in the context of born freedom after the collapse of communist regime. They coordinate change and they underwent an essential reformation. How far the nonconformist art was pushed on the marginal position before 1989, that far was the official art pushed on the margins after 1989. The existing narrative of nonconformist art became, in post-communist situation, one of the main narratives by investigating the past, accompanied by the longing to fill the white spaces, to catch up on non-existent art historical analysis and missing exhibition practice. Actually, it was the process of supplementary compensation of the iniquitous treatment and the restriction of the communist regime. It seems to us today that this in-return exclusion was necessary, that something that we could consider as justified status quo could have been generated in art history. In contemporary conditions, we could claim that art historians have achieved now the stadium and point of departure for bearing the ability to consider both narratives nearby as equal. Whereby the official and non-conformist art spheres were under the communist rule one interrelated system, the writing history of these two spheres was mostly treated separately, either before or after 1989. So in contemporary art history of the last decade, we see methodological approaches that the time has come to connect the research of these two narratives into one interrelated system of art history. The parallel step is to relate it to existing Western art history by using it not as a ruling benchmark, but rather as one of the points of orientation that we have to be aware of. So I think of all these, the question which arise for me, it's a working version, are if we can make this division into these three narratives, if it makes sense, if it would be possible to make this comparison on this kind of division also in other countries within former Eastern Bloc. And the second pivotal question would be, if yes, the second pivotal question would be how these narratives change, if the process and mechanisms of change and transformation after 1989 is the same in different countries, for example, in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and so on. So at the end, I have one quotation also by Jiří Ševčík, I quote, "By compensating the loss during totality, we do not have a chance to discover any truth about the past. At the utmost, we are able to discover the truth about our reconstruction of the past. This fits both to the West and to the East." So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your comments and to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.